evening, everyone. I would like to congratulate W3C for the initiative, reminding you that W3C is an initiative of the CGI and NIC.br, and that have been responsible since they were set up in 1995 for the development, a safe, sustainable development of internet in Brazil, and could not be detached from the discussion of accessibility that, as Simone mentioned, is part of our regulation, and hence public policies, the action of all of us involved in the internet should be in tune with this goal and should be totally connected to the main goals of Tim Berners-Lee when he developed the web, which is to universalize the access and ensure equal opportunities to all possible and everyone who wants to access the internet with autonomy and may enjoy the new technologies on equal basis. And today we have to talk about this with great authority, Léonie Watson, who is communication director with developers and main engineer of the Paciello Group. And she's going to talk to us about a project she's developed, the human, based on the 3 laws of robotics of Isaac Asimov. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to give Léonie the floor.
Thank you, Léonie, for your willingness to share with us your precious knowledge. And we have 14 minutes to talk, and then we will open the floor to the participants. Thank you, and good work.
Obrigada. Olá. I would like to talk to you about being human, and in particular, being a human with a disability in this world of artificial intelligence and smart technology. It turns out we've been dreaming about artificial intelligence, about machines that are bigger, more capable than we are as humans for a very long time. If we go back to the 3rd century BCE, there's a book known as the Argonautica, which tells the stories of Jason and the Argonauts. And one of these stories, they go to Crete and encounter a big bronze statue known as Talos that protected the island of Crete by taking around and throwing rocks at people that it thought were enemies of the people there. So this is perhaps one of the first times that we thought about artificial intelligence as a protector of human beings, or perhaps even as a weapon. 8th century is a series of stories known as the Metamorphoses by Ovid, and one of them tells the story of Pygmalion, who carved a statue that he fell in love with. It was so beautiful, this statue of a woman. Ultimately, the goddess Aphrodite brought the statue to life, and Pygmalion was so in love with the statue that he married her and presumably lived happily ever after. Perhaps one of the first times we thought about artificial life and intelligence as a companion, as someone to see us through life in a positive way. In 1818, Mary Shelley wrote the novel Frankenstein, about a monster, a synthetic life form that was brought to life with electricity. And this maybe foretold the importance of electricity, both to human beings and to the creation of artificial intelligence, as a way of driving the processes that go into thinking and all the other activities that both humans and artificial intelligence use. In 1870, English person known as Samuel Butler wrote a book called Erewhon, actually called on some writing he had done almost 10 years before, as Darwin and the Machines, where he wondered, okay, thank you. So Samuel Butler wrote some early works called Darwin and the Machines. And he wondered about the idea that a machine could evolve intelligence in the same way that Darwin had recently proposed that humans had evolved. It was laughed at the time, even as a work of fiction. But, as we now know, with intelligent life being possible, able to learn, we actually do have something similar. We have artificial intelligence that can absorb information and learn and develop on its own. In 1921, a playwright, Karel Čapek, wrote a book called, in the English translation, Rossum's Universal Robots, and introduced into the English language the word robot to represent an artificial life form with intelligence. And it's a word that's become very common going forward. And of course, in 1950, Isaac Asimov wrote his book, I, Robot, which was a collection of short stories, the one of which was Runaround, that introduced the 3 laws of robotics. And he actually did it as a handbook of robotics that will be published in 2058. And it contains 3 laws for interacting with humans if you are a robot. And I'm going to use these 3 laws to explore some of the ideas of being human and dealing with artificial intelligence. Asimov himself made an interesting comment about the 3 laws. He said that they were the only way that a human being could interact with robots, or indeed anything else in life. But he admitted that when he says this, he often forgets that human beings themselves are not rational. Not only are human beings not always rational, we're actually really complicated. Homo sapiens, human life form as we know it, arrived on our history map about 300,000 years ago. And at this time, we wouldn't really recognize ourselves as human beings. We hadn't developed a lot of the characteristics that we would recognize in ourselves today.
So it wasn't until about 50,000 years ago that we developed what we call behavioral modernity. We learned to work together collaboratively in teams. We became creative. We have cave paintings and other evidence that humans had started to draw and communicate through artwork. We started to be able to think in abstract terms instead of absolutes. And this is the first time when humans really started to become something like what we recognize ourselves to be today. Human intelligence consists of many different things, and I'm going to choose just 4 of them to focus on. Seeing, hearing, thinking, and speaking, because these cover much of what it is we do every moment of every day as human beings. When we see, we use about 30% of our brains when we see things. We're processing visual information all of the time. The fibers that go from our eyes, from our retinas to our brain, contain nearly 1 million fibers each, processing all that data through to our brain. But seeing isn't easy. If you can see the image on the screen, think to yourself, what color are the squares marked A and B? Are they the same color, or are they different colors? Anyone want to shout out? Are they? They look different, but they are actually the same. There's an optical illusion at work that our brains really struggle to process. And seeing is like that all of the time. Our brains take the information and they do an enormous amount of guesswork. There was research many years ago now where they asked someone to wear a pair of glasses that turned all their vision upside down. And within a very short space of time, the brain had corrected the problem. It was still processing the visual information upside down, but by the time it had been processed and the human had understood that information, the picture was the right way up. So a lot of information gets processed visually. Seeing is also one of the areas where humans have problems sometimes. Either people like myself who are blind and can't see, People who have low vision, they can see something, but not very well. And more commonly, people who see things differently. People who are colorblind, for example, and have difficulty telling perhaps red and green or red, green and blue from each other. And artificial intelligence is one of the ways that we are starting to help people with these conditions and disabilities overcome them. Hearing is another thing we do. We don't use as much of our brains hearing as we do seeing, but it's still quite a lot of information that gets processed through sound. And the way we interpret sound is really quite remarkable. If we listen to the opening few bars of a famous piece of music by the Beatles, it'll be very familiar to you. Right, I'm not having any luck today whatsoever with sound, but there we go. If we listen to this piece of music, hopefully it will play okay this time.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
Now that, if you're not a musicologist, is played in the key of F major. And it's a very positive, uplifting piece of music. It makes us feel good when we hear it. But if we transpose that same piece of music into B minor, then it sounds very, very different, and our brains translate it emotionally in a very different way.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
So when we process information, whether we're seeing or hearing, we interpret it. We choose to understand different things in what we hear and what we see. Some things we understand make us feel happy, other things a little sad. And that's a very human characteristic, a very human thing to do with the information that we receive. Hearing, of course, is another area where humans can have difficulties. Some people are completely deaf and hear nothing, and will also use sign language often as their first language, not the spoken language of the country they happen to live in. Other people just have difficulty hearing some of the time. They maybe need volume turned up on the television or want to listen to music a little louder than other people, but that can make it very difficult in noisy environments, for example, to communicate properly when you can't hear. Speaking uses about 50% of our brain's capability because we are watching and listening as well as formulating a response to what we are seeing and we're hearing. So speaking takes actually quite a lot of our brain power. And if you think speaking is easy, then just think about something simple like the way we greet each other.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
G'day.
Hey, what's a crack? Hola.
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 ¿Cómo estás? Buena vida.
Xin chào.
Xin chào.
Xin chào.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. ¿Cómo está?
¿Cómo está?
¿Cómo está Inglés?
مرحبا.
مرحبا. السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bonsoir. Bonjour.
Allô, ça va fait. Plus tard. Hello.
Hello.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
준비됐어.
Selamat sejahtera.
สวัสดี
สวัสดีค่ะ
Oi.
Hesi.
Merhaba.
Namaskaram.
Ahoy.
Jate. Minglawa.
Dish aval.
Kioro.
Selamat.
Gondayin. Sawe.
Namaste.
Shalom.
Ja, ninga boy. You're great.
Salam.
Ramu.
And that is just a very small number of the different languages that people speak. We actually speak hundreds, even thousands of languages around the world. So understanding speech is not necessarily a very easy thing to do. People also have trouble with speaking. Some people are just not able to formulate speech at all. They can't put the words together. They can't make themselves heard. Other people are physically unable to communicate using speech. Their brains work okay and tell them what they want to say, but for some reason that message doesn't reach their mouth and the other parts of the body needed to formulate the speech. So for some people, speaking is very, very difficult. And lastly, we have thinking, which takes up most of our brain. All of everything we do requires thinking about. Whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, we're thinking all of the time. And this, again, is another area that people struggle with. Some people have trouble processing large amounts of data. something that big data now is helping us to do on a massive scale. Some people have difficulty learning new information or remembering new information. So thinking is also a big challenge for humans, some more than others. And these are all areas that artificial intelligence is starting to help us with. One person, of course, who perhaps did more thinking about artificial intelligence in the early days than anyone else is Alan Turing. And he was the first person really to suggest the idea of artificial intelligence in a paper in the 1950s, where he speculated about the possibility of machines that were intelligent enough that they could fool someone in the imitation game. In other words, in a conversation unseen with an artificial intelligence, another human being would be convinced they were not talking to an artificial intelligence, but to another human being. The discipline of AI itself didn't come about really until 1956, when there was a conference at the Dartmouth College in America. And the idea behind the conference was based on this proposal that all learning and features could be described in terms that were so precise a machine could imitate them. And with that really came the birth of AI as we know it today. And we started using AI almost from the beginning to help us solve some of the problems that humans have. We started looking at seeing, computer vision or machine vision, the ability for intelligence to acquire an image, analyze it, and understand what it contained. We looked into hearing, the ability of artificial intelligence to listen to someone speaking or communicating and translate that into text or some other data that can be reused. We looked into speaking, the ability of an intelligence to translate text or other data into something that we humans would recognize as speech and be able to respond to. And, of course, the whole thing of artificial intelligence is really about thinking. How do we take data in, translate, process it, analyze it, understand it, and communicate data out in a way that humans can understand? So our first law of robotic. A robot may not harm another human being. Well, there are many scare stories about how AI is going to be the end of the human race and everything in it. But actually, when it comes to accessibility and disability, AI is proving remarkably helpful. But that's only happened very, very recently. Back in 1976, it was estimated that to have real-time vision, real-time computer vision, it would take something like 1,000 million instructions per second, 1,000 MIPS. At the time, the fastest computer available was only capable of about 80 to 130 MIPS, so we didn't have the processing power available to make these things happen. By the time it was 2011, and we had started to see computer vision simulations of real-time vision, we came to understand that it actually took closer to 10,000 to 1 million MIPS to be able to create something approximating real-time human vision. So the processing power needed for a lot of these things is absolutely enormous. In the 1980s, Moravec described what is now known as Moravec's paradox, because he understood that doing things that require high-level reasoning, like solving algebra, is actually very easy in computational terms. It doesn't take much thinking about. But something low-level, like recognizing an image, takes a lot more processing power than we ever thought possible. It doesn't seem to make sense, but we know it's very, very true. If we take something simple, like a chair, the one on screen is wooden, it has a back and 4 legs, and most people would probably recognize it as a chair. So identifying it, that's easy. But then what about this chair? It doesn't look anything like the first. It's made of canvas, it's round, sort of doesn't really have any legs. It's not even really clear how you sit in it, but it's still a chair. Or this one. It's another chair, we sit in it, but it's shaped completely differently. The legs are gone. None of the physical characteristics look the same as either of the first 2 chairs. So it turns out that something we can do as humans very, very easily is really hard when you've got to think about it in terms of rules. If we just took that sample of 3 images, what are the rules we would use to describe what is a chair? In 2006, Eric Schmidt of Google was the first to talk about what we now know as the cloud. And with it came the possibility of elastic processing power. We can call on as much processing power in the cloud as we need to. And for the first time, we were able to start using that massive potential processing power to make artificial intelligence work in really useful ways for human beings. In 2016, Facebook introduced its image recognition. Up until this point, if you were blind, if you couldn't see, when someone posted a picture to Facebook, you had no idea what was in it. There was no information at all about the image. But with this image recognition API, Facebook changed that. Whenever someone now posts a picture to Facebook, it's automatically described. So this one on screen is the day I got my hair changed to this color. Now, the description isn't good, but it's not bad. It just says a person indoors and close up, which is true. And it's a lot better than the information I didn't have access to before. And in time, it'll keep getting better. So for the first time, blind people were able to engage with Facebook in a much more equal way, thanks to some artificial intelligence. Things have moved on really fast since then. Microsoft has an app called Seeing AI, which is a truly remarkable piece of software for someone who is visually impaired or blind.
Seeing AI is a Microsoft research project for people with visual impairments. The app narrates the world around you by turning the visual world into an audible experience. Point your phone's camera, select a channel, and hear a description. The app recognizes saved friends.
Jenny near top right, 3 feet away.
Describes the people around you, including their emotions.
28-year-old female wearing glasses looking happy.
It reads text out loud as it comes into view, like on an envelope.
Ken Lawrence, P.O. Box.
Or a room entrance.
Conference 2005.
Or scan and read documents like books and letters. The app will guide you and recognize the text with its formatting.
Top and left edge is not visible. Hold steady. Lease agreement. This agreement
When paying with cash, the app identifies currency bills.
$20 US.
When looking for something in your pantry or at the store, use the barcode scanner with audio cues to help you find what you want.
Campbell's tomato soup.
When available, hear additional product details.
Heated microwave bowl on height.
And even hear descriptions of images in other apps like Twitter by importing them into Seeing AI.
A close-up of Bill Gates.
Finally, explore our experimental features like scene descriptions to get a glimpse of the future.
I think it's a young girl throwing a frisbee in the park.
Experience the world around you with the Seeing AI app from Microsoft.
And as a blind person, it's really hard to explain to you just how incredible this one app, this one free app, is to someone who's blind. And there is so much going on there. So many different forms of image recognition, whether it's currency or colors, even handwriting or text, dealing with huge amounts of data to make that happen. The barcode scanner. This is an app that works in, I think, 70 different countries and languages. So they have got data in there for all the common foods that you can buy in a supermarket for each of those countries. Huge amounts of data. And for the first time, thanks to this, it's possible, if you're a blind person, to do so many different things, to be more independent financially when you're out shopping and recognizing currency, to sit in a room and wonder, what's around me? If I point my phone over there and take a picture, I can suddenly now get a description of what's out the window, what's across the road, all thanks to AI. This year, Apple took it a step further, and they have introduced Face ID with their iPhone X range. And in doing so, they've created something that was intended for mainstream use, but has lots of benefits for people with different disabilities. So now we have technology that if you have trouble thinking, trouble remembering passwords, makes it much easier for you to securely access your devices. If you have difficulty typing your password in, things like Face ID, Touch ID make it much easier, and they're all courtesy of different forms of artificial intelligence. Apple have even now taken it to the point where they can recognize the difference between what they're seeing as a real human being and a very good photograph of the same human being. The AI is that intelligent now, it can understand the difference between a copy and the real thing. Number 2, a robot must obey orders given it by human beings unless it would conflict with the first rule. Well, for a human being to give a robot an order, it has to be able to be understood. The robot has to understand the human, and the human has to understand the robot. This is an area that has been developing, again, for a long number of years. The ability for technology, for artificial intelligence now, to listen to what a human being says and respond to it. Apple were one of the first to take this to market.
Macintosh, open letter. Macintosh, print letter. Macintosh, fax letter.
While everyone else is still trying to build a computer you can understand,
Macintosh, shut down.
We've built a Macintosh that can understand you.
Goodbye.
Now, in fairness, Apple is usually a triumph of marketing over truth, because by my reckoning, talking to technology didn't get nearly that easy for at least another 20 years. But the technology did at least exist. By the time 1997 came around, we saw Dragon introduce speech recognition as a way to help people write text when, for some reason or another, it was difficult for them to use a keyboard.
This is Dragon Naturally Speaking, speech recognition software that turns your voice into text 3 times faster than typing, with up to 99% accuracy, period.
And so this is something that was originally developed for lawyers and doctors who wanted to be able to dictate reports, but was very soon adopted by people who had difficulty typing, difficulty entering information in the conventional ways, and so found it easier to talk to their technology. And that covers not only people who have different kinds of thinking disability, who find speech difficult, but also people who have mobility disabilities and find actual hardware interaction with keyboards difficult. By 2016, we were using artificial intelligence for translation. We had been, actually, for a very long time, but it had been pretty terrible. It had made some quite humorous mistakes from time to time. But Google, in 2016, teamed up its DeepMind capability with its translation capability and produced some quite remarkable results.
In November, Google began experimenting with the new company relationship. After years of useful but at times goofy translations, Google applied their machine learning program to their translation software, and the pairing has been impressive. Since merging Google Translate with DeepMind, the quality of translations is on par with the professional. Jun Regimoto, a professor at the University of Tokyo, has already put the paired features to the test by comparing a Googled translation of The Great Gatsby with the original. Aside from missing an article, the Google translation and original copy were indistinguishable.
Automatic translation. We're starting to see this capability used in much more practical ways now, though. Certain Android phones have the ability to do real-time translation, so you can talk to someone in a different language just using automatic recognition and translation. Skype offers a very similar service where you can have a conversation with someone who does not speak your language and have all the translation happen with enough accuracy to make that conversation, if not 100% perfect, then at least good enough for humans to be able to communicate with each other where they probably couldn't have done before. It doesn't have to be all about actual spoken language either. AI is being used to help us translate sign language, the language used by many deaf people, instead of the spoken language of the country they live or grew up in.
This project is a sign language translator. It translates from one sign language to another. It helps the hearing and the deaf communicate.
你喜欢西雅图的天气吗?
You can communicate between American Sign Language and Chinese Sign Language, or potentially any sign languages to any other natural language.
The Connect will capture the sign language and then recognize the meaning of the sign language, including the posture, the trajectory, and then there's an automatic translation into spoken language.
我很喜欢这个. I really like this.
And again, so much happening there. The ability to watch motion of someone's hand, to translate it, then we have more 5 minutes. Okay. Then to process that information and translate it into something that someone else can understand is quite remarkable. Then there's the speaking part. In the 1700s, Wolfgang Bestian came up with a speaking machine, and it was a replica of the human lungs and vocal tract that could make noises. That's something that we have still followed when we get to 1931, and a speaking machine that was created to simulate human speech using an artificial set of lungs, bellows, and a vocal tract.
The machine uses only 2 sounds produced electrically. One of these represents the breath. The other, the vibration of the vocal cords. There are no phonograph records or anything of that sort. Only electrical circuits such as are used in telephone practice. Let's see how you put expression into a sentence. Say, she saw me, with no expression. She saw me. Now say it in answer to these questions. Who saw you? She saw me. Whom did she see? She saw me. Did she see you or hear you? She saw me.
So one of the first examples of a robotic system being able to talk back to us. It wasn't until the 60s that we managed to do this electronically, and the Daisy Bell computer at Bell Laboratories.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you.
Because if we're going to have our artificial intelligence talk to us, why not have it sing to us? Seems like a good idea to me. By 1984, again, Apple were the ones to really break new ground and bring this to the launch of their Macintosh computer.
Now, we've done a lot of talking about Macintosh recently, but today, for the first time ever, I'd like to let Macintosh speak for itself.
Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag. And accustomed as I am to public speaking, I'd like to share with you a maxim I thought of the first time I met an IBM mainframe. Never trust a computer you can't read.
It's going to cut off again there. But another interesting aspect of our conversations with artificial intelligence and technology is humor and the ability to use it to make the experience more human. In 2014, Amazon introduced the Echo and many characteristics that help people with disabilities in many different ways.
Introducing Amazon Echo.
Hi there.
And some of Echo's first customers. Echo is a device designed around your voice. Simply say Alexa and ask a question or give a command.
Alexa, how many tablespoons are in 3/4 cup?
3/4 cups is 12 tablespoons.
Echo is connected to Alexa, a cloud-based voice service, so it can help out with all sorts of useful information right when you need it.
To me, it's, bringing technology from Iron Man, Tony Stark's house into your own.
Echo can hear you from anywhere in the room, so it's always ready to help.
I can have the water running, I could be cooking, the TV can be on in the back room, and she still can hear me.
It can create shopping lists,
Alexa, add waffles to my shopping list.
provide news,
From NPR News in Washington.
control lights.
Alexa, turn on the lights.
We use it to set timers. We use that feature all the time, and that's one that's specifically helpful, I think, uniquely to blind people.
Calendars.
Today at 1 p.m. there's lunch with Madeline.
And much more.
So there we see all of this coming together, the ability for us to talk to a technology, for it to understand us, our accents, the command that we want to give it, and to respond to us in a very convenient way. And as we heard, it helps people who are blind listen to audiobooks or do things like set timers, listen to the newspapers. Helps people who have cognitive difficulties remembering things, add things to their shopping list so they don't forget. And it makes the whole process much more simple. Speaking is a very natural thing for most people to do. So lastly, a robot must protect its own existence. And that's all very well, but we have to remember that artificial intelligence is, at its heart, human. It's down to the information we give it and the way we create it that will determine whether it comes to harm or not. In 2013, IBM Watson, the AI, went through a process of being given the Urban Dictionary to learn because they wanted it to sound more natural in conversation. What actually happened is that the AI started swearing like nobody's business, and they had to remove the Urban Dictionary from its data sets to stop it being so awful to listen to. In 2016, Microsoft released AI, an AI that was designed to go out and communicate with people, young people, particularly on Twitter. And what actually happened was it learnt from Twitter, that's always a bad sign, and became foul-mouthed, abusive, racist, and they took it offline 24 hours later because it had become something so terrible. In 2017, Google's Translate, for all its DeepMind capability, started making some pretty terrible mistakes with its English to Turkish translations. It kept getting the pronouns wrong. And so what happens is when it translated text about jobs that people do, it implied that women tended to do jobs that required no intelligent capability at all, and men were going out doing jobs that required all the hard thinking. It was an accident of interpretation and processing of the data, but the gender implications were enormous. In 2018, Amazon's recognition API mistook 20-odd members of the US Congress for criminals. Now, there is a fair argument to be made for it might well have been right, but you can't have technology going around making mistakes like that, because if we apply it to disability, what happens when my face recognition application tells me as a blind person that I'm just about to talk with someone I trust and recognize? What if it gets that wrong? So the implications for AI and getting things wrong and the data that we feed it are really important, of course, but they're particularly important for people with disabilities who will, trust me, come hugely to depend on AI as a part of their ability to get things done. So for the moment, I think Microsoft, again, actually puts it best. AI, right here and right now, just amplifies our human ingenuity. And one final video, and I will be done.
Behind every great achievement, every triumph of human progress, you'll find people driven to move the world forward. People finding inspiration where it's least expected. People who lead with their imagination. But in an increasingly complex world, we face new challenges. And sometimes it feels like we've reached our limits. Now, with the help of intelligent technology, we can achieve more. We can access information that empowers us in new ways. We can see things that we didn't see before. And we can stay on top of what matters most. When we have the right tools and AI extends our capabilities, we can tap into even greater potential. Whether it's a life-changing innovation, being the hero for the day, making a difference in someone's future, or breaking down barriers to bring people closer together. Intelligent technology helps you to see more, do more, and be more. And when your ingenuity is amplified, you are unstoppable.
Obrigada. Thank you.
I'll take the privilege of asking the first question. If Léonie has concerns with the fact that this technology that is major for accessibility be in the hands of so few companies and American companies, US companies, what are her concerns also regarding security? Because connectivity of all these devices implies data transfer, and that could put at risk the security. And what does she think about this?
I think there is a risk. We see it in accessibility already. Some people believe that using an automated accessibility testing tool will give you all the information that you need about how to make something accessible to people who are disabled. We know that already. That isn't true. You need to test your website or your app with real people, with human beings who need accessibility to make sure we get it right. I think it's the same with AI. If we're not careful, we will think that AI can solve all our accessibility problems and give us all the answers. And if we forget that human beings are a vital part of AI, we will start making mistakes in terms of accessibility. In terms of data, you're right. I've had it happen. I depend on my iPhone, my smartphone, so much for so many things as a blind person. If I suddenly lose data, that's me stopped. You know, and yeah, it's scary. What do you do if the technology you are relying on to navigate you to your destination or to help make you understood to someone who doesn't speak your language isn't available? That's a really big concern, and we do need to think about things like that because we are becoming more and more dependent on these technologies.
Okay, I'll open up for the floor. I'll open up for the floor. Anyone?
Pronto, primeira pergunta aqui.
First question.
Na fila, né?
I'm
Oi, Léonie, é o Reinaldo aqui do Ceweb.
Hello, Leonard from
Eu queria
Ceweb.
saber como você vem percebendo a evolução da compreensão dessas aplicações de inteligência artificial, porque por um lado você mostrou que o Google já consegue reconhecer imagens e coisas até mais complexas, mas coisas simples ainda têm uma certa dificuldade, como por exemplo a tradução ainda do português de contra filé, ele traduz para against beef e não sirloin steak.
Yeah, the Portuguese sirloin steak, it translates for against filet or something like that, or mistranslated. So I'd like to know what you think, what the reason how you perceive this evolution or this development.
I think we're making good progress. For a long time, we didn't have access to any of these things. And if I use the Facebook image recognition example, it's not a perfect description. It doesn't tell me everything that's in that image. And when Facebook first started using it, a lot of people criticized them. They said, these descriptions are not good enough for blind people. But the truth is that if you had nothing before, then something is almost always better. And that's how it is with a lot of these. Some translation will get you closer to understanding someone than no translation. Some image description will get you closer to understanding what's in a picture than no description. So as long as we remember that these things aren't perfect, and may never be perfect, I think they are a definite improvement over what came before. Having said that, I think we'll start seeing these things, or keep seeing these things, just keep getting better and better. When Google first introduced automatic speech recognition for YouTube videos so that you could produce captions for deaf and hearing impaired people. They made some really silly, often really embarrassing mistakes. You almost never see that happening now because the technology has improved, its accuracy and its understanding has improved. So I think very quickly we'll start seeing all of these things get much, much better.
Good morning, congratulations on your talk. I'd like to ask a question that
Por mais que a maioria dos do poder que a tecnologia traz, eu acho que os ganhos,
how much power we get, well, we have accessibility things, these gains are fantastic, and we can well, overcome ethical issues that we face. But I'd like to ask Léonie what she thinks about, well, when we think about ethical, moral issues, machine learning and AI, things that they have been causing, we feel uncomfortable with the lack of privacy. But when we see accessible devices, I don't know if people have been asking the people that actually use them if they feel some kind of problem regarding privacy or feeling uncomfortable sharing the data. It certainly help daily for them to perform their activities.
Obrigada. Yes, privacy is important. I think you are right. We must ask the user if they are happy to share information. So I use the Seeing AI app because I'm okay with sharing the information that I give it, because what I get in return is acceptable, it's valuable to me, and the information I have to give away is not too personal. There are other situations where I won't do things using AI on similar technologies because what is required of me and my personal data is, for me at least, too much to put into the hands of somebody I don't know and will never meet. So we do need to keep privacy and security in mind because, you know, sharing information, giving away personal information is only one part of it. If we could guarantee that that information would remain secure, then we'd be more likely to trust sharing it in the first place. So the two things, I think, are you know, they work side by side, privacy and security, as a trade-off against accessibility.
Oi, bom dia. Meu nome é Felipe.
My name is Felipe. I'm also blind. I'd like to ask a question.
Aqui no Brasil a tecnologia chega, só que para mim a necessidade chega de forma atrasada e também cara. Por exemplo, a minha necessidade foi ter um iPhone. Os dois últimos que eu tive é quase o valor de um carro aqui no Brasil. E a dificuldade da ciência e da tecnologia em avançar, a gente sabe que é muito grande, mas a nossa dificuldade em acessar essa tecnologia é tão grande quanto. Dentro desse pensamento, né, da acessibilidade, existem alguns movimentos que tornam a acessibilidade acessível para o terceiro mundo?
Hola, it's a good comment. I think the answer is yes. We need to do more for the technologies I've been talking about today, but if we look at computers themselves, when I lost my sight in the year 2000, there were only two screen readers, two examples of the software I use that translates what's on screen into synthetic speech, and they both cost hundreds of pounds, far more money than I could afford at the time because I wasn't working. Now there are screen readers built into every platform, so whether you buy an Android phone or an iPhone, a Windows computer or a Mac, or even a Linux computer, there is a screen reader available to you, either integrated into the operating system or available for free download. So I think we've already seen that change take place in kind of desktop and laptop computers, and we will start to see it change in smartphones as well, I think. And I'm reasonably confident of this because we've already seen smartphones change how things work, even in countries that have access to technology more quickly. The apps you can get on your phone that will recognize text and read it to you if you're blind used to, again, cost hundreds of pounds, and you now get them for free on your phone. So I think there is a move across the industry to make technology itself more accessible, more affordable. We've got a long way to go. It needs to get much, much better. But I think that is the way things are going, and it will keep improving.
Okay, we're going to close
quero agradecer
now.
muitíssimo a Léonie pela palestra, por compartilhar com a gente todo esse conhecimento. E agradecer e encerrar por aqui. A gente agora vai para o almoço, né? Não? Tem mais uma palestra agora. Fiquem por aqui. E depois a gente vai para o almoço. Muito obrigada pela atenção de todos. E obrigada de novo a Léonie.
Thank you, Léonie, once again.
Obrigada. Thank you.